There's a verdict living inside you that you didn't choose, don't remember agreeing to, and can't seem to shake, no matter how many mornings you decide to try again. That's what church hurt does that nobody warns you about. It doesn't just leave you hurt. It leaves you carrying a document written by the wrong people, presenting it at a door that only accepts the original. You've shown up, you've genuinely tried, you've sat in services that hurt to attend, listened to sermons about getting closer to God, and applied what you heard with real effort. You've tried to forgive, you've asked for a softer heart, and still there's this wall, invisible, solid, you push against it in prayer and it doesn't move. And then, almost automatically, the same thought arrives in that quiet place where you're most honest with yourself. Something must be wrong with me. Other people seem to get through. Why can't I? That question feels like a spiritual one. It isn't. It's a diagnostic one, and it's been getting the wrong answer for years. Here's what nobody said out loud to you, and maybe nobody in your life is equipped to say it yet. That wall isn't spiritual weakness. It isn't a lack of faith. It isn't God withholding himself as some form of discipline. The wall was installed by an injury. And injuries, unlike weaknesses, have a specific cause, a specific location, and a specific pathway toward healing from church hurt. Treating a fracture like it's a character flaw doesn't just fail to heal it, it makes it worse. Every day you walk around believing something is wrong with you spiritually, you're applying the wrong treatment to a wound that needs something entirely different. And that matters. Because every day the misdiagnosis continues, the gap between you and God doesn't stay the same. It quietly widens, not because he's moving, because the false document in your hands keeps telling you he is. There's research on what happens in the brain when a person is socially rejected. Not vague emotional pain, the same neural circuits that fire when you break your arm fire when you're excluded, dismissed, or publicly discarded by people you trusted. The brain does not distinguish between physical injury and social injury at the level of raw experience. Both register as damage, both trigger a protective response. Now add one layer to that biological reality. The rejection came from people in spiritual authority, people who spoke in God's name, who used theological language to deliver the wound, "This is the Lord's will," or "God revealed this to us," or who simply claimed to represent him when they pulled away without explanation. Your brain, already designed to treat rejection as injury, had to process something it was never built to handle. It couldn't separate the messenger from the message. So it filed both together. And what got stored in that file wasn't "those people failed me." What got stored was something quieter, deeper, and far more damaging. God sees me the way they did. You didn't lose your faith, you inherited a wounded image of how God sees you. Those are not the same thing, but they feel identical from the inside. This is where the invisible becomes visible, because that wounded image doesn't announce itself as a faith crisis. It doesn't show up as a theological argument you can debate. It shows up in patterns so subtle, so embedded in the texture of your daily prayer life that most people never connect them to church hurt at all. They just quietly accept them as their spiritual condition. They're not, they are symptoms, they are the injury speaking. Feelings that have names can be healed. Feelings without names just get called my spiritual life. There are three, you may recognize yourself in one or in all of them. The first, you pray from a crouch. Not physically, internally, there's a posture inside your prayer that sounds like if it's not too much trouble. Like you're approaching God the way you'd approach someone who has said no before, someone who has every right to say no again, someone you're not entirely sure is glad you came. You pray, but there's a slight bracing underneath it, a lowered expectation built into the ask itself. That's not humility. Humility knows God is vast. What you're carrying is something else. It's the lived-in belief that you specifically might be the kind of person he finds unremarkable. The second, answered prayer surprises you more than it should. There's a moment when something works, when something shifts, when God clearly moved, and your first reaction isn't gratitude, it's something closer to shock. A quiet "oh," because somewhere underneath your theology, underneath what you intellectually believe about God's love, there is a factory setting that got changed by people who used his name to deliver rejection. And now every yes feels like an exception rather than a pattern. an unexpected kindness from someone you expected to dismiss you. The third, you interpret God's silence as confirmation. The seasons where heaven feels quiet and every believer passes through them, you don't just feel alone, you feel like the silence is agreeing with something. Like the absence of an obvious answer is the universe confirming what the church implied about you. The silence becomes a verdict. The verdict sounds like they were right about me after all. Not one of those is a sign of a weak spirit. Every single one is a sign that something was done to your self-perception. That a false verdict was installed in the most intimate room of your prayer life, and it has been living there undisturbed. The reason Pray Harder doesn't fix this and why Forgive Faster doesn't either is that both responses treat this like a willpower problem, like a discipline problem. Like if you pushed harder against the same wall, it would eventually give way. But you can't strengthen your way out of a fracture. A broken bone doesn't need motivation. It needs the right treatment applied to the right place. And the right place isn't your effort, it's your image. The picture you're carrying of how God actually sees you, not humanity in general, not theologically in the abstract, but you specifically in the particular, has been distorted by spiritual rejection. And distortions don't heal through more striving, they heal through correction. Here's the part that carries the most weight and the most cruelty. This injury convinced you the wound is your fault, that if you were spiritually stronger, more consistent, more faithful, the wall wouldn't be there. So you work harder at the very thing the wound is blocking, and when it doesn't open, the injury whispers, "See," and you believe it, again and again. Ephesians 1 doesn't begin with what you've done. It doesn't begin with your attendance record, your prayer discipline, your spiritual performance, or the verdict placed on you by people who were never authorized to place it. It begins before all of that, chosen in Him before the foundation of the world. That is not a motivational phrase, that is a theological correction. It means the original document, the one that describes who you are and how God sees you, was written before you ever set foot in a sanctuary, before anyone in spiritual authority had the chance to write over it. What the church installed was not a revelation. It was graffiti on top of an original, and the original is still there. It hasn't been revised by their rejection. It hasn't been updated by your distance, your silence, or the prayer you've been offering from a crouch. The identity in Christ written in that chapter is not contingent on whether certain people in authority approved of you. It predates them. It will outlast them. And it is the only verdict that was ever authorized to speak into the deepest part of you. You were never as far from God as you feared. The distance you felt was real, but it was the distance of someone carrying a false document, presenting it at a door that will only accept the true one. The moment that false verdict is named, seen clearly for what it is, and replaced not with effort but with the original text, something in prayer changes. The crouch lifts a little. The expectation of no starts to feel less permanent. The silence stops sounding like agreement. Because it wasn't agreement, it never was, it was just quiet. And God is deeply, consistently comfortable in the quiet. Church hurt didn't leave you angry, that would have been simpler. It left you apologizing to a God who is already running toward you. The question worth sitting with now isn't how do I get closer to God, it's this: what would shift in your prayer life if you genuinely believed He has never once looked at you the way they did? That your original identity was written before any of them had a say. That question is worth everything, and wherever you choose to take it, that's exactly where healing from church hurt begins.